God called this creation good back in Genesis. We just about to call it gone. By the way, we humans are messing with this place that God has given us as a trust. So we have to be alert how to be good stewards of God's creation, or what's left of it. Because as it goes, we go. This is our earth and our home.
I've heard David Radcliff say, "This earth is in trouble, and we are continually having to work to deal with threats to God's creation." Welcome to Brethren Voices. This program brings together people of various faith groups in Portland, Oregon, all of whom are concerned with threats to the community and our livelihood in Portland, Oregon. Today we're going to be talking about the ecology, justice, and preserving our way of life and living in harmony with nature. Welcome to Brethren Voices. To explain what EcoFaith is all about, I'm going to ask Solveig to explain the organization and its structure.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share about what we're doing, about what we're up to here in Portland. So all of us here are part of an initiative called Beyond Fossil Fuels. That initiative, the Beyond Fossil Fuels initiative, is one of many initiatives of a larger group called EcoFaith Recovery. EcoFaith Recovery is a network of individuals and congregations around the Pacific Northwest, but particularly in the Portland area. And we are focusing our energies on awakening leaders within congregations to mobilize those congregations to take bold and courageous action for the recovery of human life and for the healing of God's creation. So that's what EcoFaith Recovery is about. Our initiative, Beyond Fossil Fuels, is one aspect of empowering leaders to take bold and courageous action. So we're focusing particularly on fossil fuel resistance and mobilizing and organizing the congregations to participate in that resistance movement. How we do that as people of faith is that we hold and design monthly grounding for action meetings. And those grounding for action meetings do just what it says. We are grounding ourselves spiritually and relationally so that we can take that bold and courageous action for the recovery of human life and the healing of God's creation.
So, EcoFaith Recovery is the overall umbrella organization, and underneath that is fossil fuel,
Beyond Fossil Fuels.
Beyond fossil fuels, like alternate energy and how do we develop those kind of things, but and our dependence and our exploitation of the fossil fuel.
Right, it's the both and, right? It's
Yeah.
like, how do we move beyond fossil fuels? Well, we have to resist the constant pressure right now, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, of fossil fuel companies wanting to export fossil fuels through our region. So if they can't get them through, if they can't move those fossil fuels through our area to the markets, then they have to keep them in the ground, and that's what we want.
I actually heard somebody say that for perpetuity, 80% of fossil fuels should stay in the ground for the future of development of humankind in the long run.
Yes.
So that makes sense, I think.
Yes.
The people of faith are increasingly waking up to this amazing story that the scientists are telling us of a 14 billion year growth of this beautiful blue globe that we live on. 5 billion years ago it came together and started forming, and the pattern was mutuality. The pattern was balance. It was as you quoted in Genesis, it was good. And then all of a sudden the Industrial Revolution comes along, and we all know what that has done to creation, to God's creation. So as people of faith, we find ourselves in a wonderful crossroads between geology and geography. The geology part of it is that all the fossil fuels are over on the other side of the mountain, are over on the other side of the mountains, and they.
Speaking from the West Coast.
Yes.
So
yes,
it's on the
right.
it's in the Midwest or the east of the Rocky Mountains.
Right. And the push is on. They realize, the fossil fuel companies are realizing that their time is very, very limited. Their time is coming to an end rapidly. And so they are pushing all this stuff as fast as they can to get it over to the markets. And the markets, this is where the geography comes in, because the markets are over in China and India. So we kind of see ourselves as part of a thin green line of resistance communities, of resurrection communities, if you will. Not always Christian, but in fact, frequently tribal folks and students, wonderful mix of folks, but all the way down the West Coast, from British Columbia through Washington, Oregon, down into California, excuse me. And this thin green line is holding out against that push to get those fossil fuels to China and India, where they will be burned and where the creation will suffer. So we see ourselves as people of faith, standing up for the creation, standing tall against this push. And as Solveig says, if they can't get the fuels through us to the markets over there, then they're not going to dig the fuels, and they're going to have to stay in the ground, and that's where they belong. If we're going to have a planet worthy of God's creation.
Could I ask each of you to just take a minute to explain who you are, where you come from, what is your faith journey about, and why this is an important issue for you to take action on?
That we are all born of the same elements as the sun. So we all share that. We are all energized by the spirit of life. And when one of us is suffering, we all suffer. And so it is our obligation to care for one another and the universe that we live in. And I want to have a place for my grandkids. I want them to have a place to live. So this is important work for me.
And to breathe clean air and to drink clean water. And
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a pastor in the Lutheran Church, ELCA. I have been for almost 20 years. I am currently a pastor of a community called the Wilderness Way Community, which is an experiment in how to be church in a powerful way in the 21st century, facing the issues that we're all facing as human beings. One of the verses that has meant a lot to me in my life is when Jesus said, "I came that they might have life and have it abundantly." And like Levita, I want that abundant life for my children and their children. I want it for all children. And what I see is that cheap fossil fuels and the entire system that has created this kind of way of life for some of us has created comfort and ease for some, hardship for many, but I want abundance for all. And that's what Jesus said, right? I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. So for me, that's what it's about. It's about how do we live in such a way that we can have abundant life for all and not just for some.
I deeply believe that God gave us this planet not to use up, but to protect. And I think we've gotten that wrong over the years. I think our culture has seen the earth as ours to use, and that's not why God gave us this earth. And we need to turn that way of thinking around. I deeply believe that our work as people of faith is to take what we learn through our faith community and take that out into the world to do the work that God has blessed us to be able to do. So we're not my faith calls me to go out and work on behalf of this creation that God has given us.
I think what brought me originally, most viscerally, into this resistance was the birth of a child, and that child was my granddaughter. And suddenly I was put in a position of saying to myself, "You've talked this talk all these years. You have lived this life all these years. Now it's time to put it on the line, because that little girl is going to be living a hellish existence if you and other people of good faith don't do something." So whether we will build the capacity to make it less hellish or not, who knows? God knows in His wisdom. But that's what brought me originally into this, Brent, and that's where I'm still grounded in this. My granddaughter now has 2 little twin brothers, so it's even more important for me.
I've heard so many people say that their whole perspective of life changed when they became grandparents.
It does.
Suddenly, things became different and so
Yeah.
much more important.
Yeah.
Part of my passion, in addition to having a relatively new granddaughter, which I think does change your perspective on life, but also the realization that so much of the impact of our continued use of fossil fuels and befouling the environment has an inordinate impact on the poor and the vulnerable, and not just in other lands when we see that impact, but most recently looking at this whole issue of the Pembina terminal. It's going to have a very heavy impact on some of the most vulnerable communities in Portland. When you look at the potential of blast zones and other things, and so that really triggers my sense of injustice, and as a person of faith, wanting to do what I can to empower communities to resist this and to take a stand, to have a healthy future for all of our community, not just those who can afford to isolate or insulate themselves from the impacts.
When you asked the question, I thought about camping with my family in the North Cascades, northern Washington state, and the deep peace of the calm lake, and the experience of being together and connecting with the planet that we live on as a family. And out of experiences like that, which we're not the only family that has felt deeply connected with each other and with the planet when we've been camping, but out of experiences like that grow a fierce solidarity within me that took me farther than the values of justice and solidarity that I was raised with as a pacifist Christian, as someone who is concerned about those who are affected by violence, but I myself wasn't necessarily affected, and in fact I was more connected to the perpetrators. So I'm here motivated by that fierce solidarity with the planet and thinking about my 2-year-old son Daniel and what he might face if I don't act now.
I hear you all talking about social justice and stewardship, and how do we live in this world?
We are in a geographic bottleneck. So the fracking and the mining that's happening in the central part of the continent is coming through here. And that means that those of us here who care about these issues are increasingly starting to say, oh, we're responsible.
Or we might have a say.
We might have a say. That if we stand up and inhabit our God-given power as humans and come together in that kind of Holy Spirit power that takes us to another level, maybe we can impact the destiny of our region or our country. So what Grounding for Action is about is it's a monthly gathering of people who are concerned about the export and extraction of fossil fuels through our region. And we come together to to tap our sources of strength and to prepare ourselves and encourage each other for action. The sources of strength are practices of community organizing, building cultures of relational power. Together, we are more than we are in isolation. Kingian nonviolence, after the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the leadership of the Black-led freedom movement in the United States. Christian spirituality, 12-step recovery, and music from social movement settings. Music has been such a source of strength for any resistance movement ever, anywhere. And so we're trying to come alive in music too. So we come together, and we come together to sing, to learn, to connect with each other about the ways that we are taking action to organize and mobilize our own congregations. So this isn't an interest group of 12 people who come together to be an amen circle. So in which we all say, "Oh, you're right, Chris. Oh, you're right. It's really horrible, isn't it, Craig?" That's not maybe some of that happens, but the purpose of Beyond Fossil Fuels and the Grounding for Action process is to encourage all of us to grow as organizers who are working within our own spheres of influence. And many people in Beyond Fossil Fuels are connecting with a particular faith community, church congregation, but there are also a significant number of us who are working in their neighborhood or in their other activity circle or something, other arenas that they travel in. And we're taking responsibility for saying, if this movement is going to grow, it's going to be us that's going to grow it. And so not just we have the right values and aren't those fuel companies evil, but what do we need to do? What are we going to do next? And what's been really exciting as the Grounding for Action process and Beyond Fossil Fuels has grown just recently is that we've started to be involved in immediate campaigns. And so that's something that we'll be talking about a little bit more tonight, that we're actually bringing people from our congregations into a process to try and impact political decisions, policy decisions in the region, so that we can stop new fuel terminals, so that we can take concerted action.
When I hear you talking, I think about being the change you want to see in the world.
Yes.
And so this group is a group of people who are supporting each other, being that change and encouraging others to be that change. Am I catching that?
Well, yes and no. So the yes is that sounds great, and people like to post that on Facebook. That quote in and of itself doesn't often stay grounded in the whole tradition of Gandhian social struggle. It's be the change you like. It's attributed to Gandhi, right? Is that right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yes, Gandhi. He's so wonderful. Gandhi was a wily strategist who organized for decades and had campaigns to both build the alternative and to resist that which needed to be stopped. So yes, it is be the change you want to be in the world, but it's the other part of Gandhi. It's not just we're gonna be recyclers, and that will save the world. Well, it's not gonna.
One of the experiences that I have had, and that many of us have had, who are concerned, who hear about a hearing that's happening, and we just want to go, and we need to do something, right? Well, I've had this experience, and many of us have had, where I go alone, or maybe with one or two other people. I leave alone, or maybe with one or two other people. I haven't made any connections, and I do not experience it as a powerful experience. And in fact, it's almost disempowering. because it's so isolating, right? So many of us have had similar experiences like that we said, we don't want to do it that way. We just don't want to do it that way anymore. So it's not about just, okay, let's get a few more people, right? But it's being deeply grounded, and then again, reaching out to our congregations or the people we're already connected to who know us and with whom we can share the values that we have. And we can say, you know what, this is really important to me. This is really important to me. Would you come with me? Can we do this together?
So, like when Solvay's talking about she can't go by herself. We just had a meeting today, and what Levin is doing is saying, not just Solvay, but people from Wilderness Way, people from Central, people from All Saints, come together. Let's understand how we can take our collective power together. Let's decide, say, we'll go see this commissioner. But when we go see this commissioner, how do you do that in a way that is really going to create power? You share your story. You let the commissioner know how this impacts you, your community, and then how it impacts him and what he can do. And then and when you come out of meeting together with that commissioner as a group, then you take time to evaluate it. What did we do? What could we do differently? What can we do next to keep creating and building more and more power to enact change and to transform?
One of the things that you're working on right now is a big issue with a natural gas terminal that's being proposed. Chris, I understand you have some information about what's going on with that, but could you explain what that issue is all about?
As people of faith, we have a unique current opportunity to keep Portland from becoming a major exporter of fossil fuels by stopping the Pembina of Canada from establishing a propane terminal here and along the Columbia River. We have concern for the lives of the people who living along the tracks who would be breathing these fumes were the terminal to be established. We have concern for the Columbia River and the land along the river and the people, given the potential of a major explosion. There would be potentially very huge explosions from these trains coming down the tracks full of propane. And those explosions could range from as far as Hayden Island to St. John's and even beyond, so the impact would be devastating potentially.
And that's like 20-mile radius. It's a huge area.
It's huge. And we have concern for of course, continued damage to the atmosphere and continued fracking, which poisons our water and ruins our land.
The U.S. Department of Transportation says there's about 10 major incidents of explosions a year relating to the transportation of gas and oil. And we only hear about them occasionally, but that's a lot. I don't hear or see much in the news about all this. Once in a while there's something little, but not too much is being told in the media about the impact and these huge investments that the fossil fuel industry is making.
I know that the fossil fuel industry as a group have spent $2 million in the year 2014 lobbying.
In Oregon?
In Oregon,
oh.
Just in Oregon. And we also know that there were all sorts of meetings between Pembina and the Port of Portland long before anybody knew anything about this, and agreements were being made. And if it wasn't for, this is good, if it wasn't for 160 feet of pipe that goes through a conservation zone, which would require rezoning of that zone, it never would have come out into the open. It would have been a done deal.
And that rezoning created a public hearing?
Public hearing in front of the Commission on Planning and Sustainability.
160 feet?
Yeah, 160 feet.
Okay.
And at those hearings, hundreds of people showed up on practically no notice at all. Nobody knew anything about Pembina. It was just coming in right underneath the radar.
The question is, what can I do? what can I do? And most of us feel like we can't do very much of anything other than sit and read the news, but we don't feel like we have any influence over it. But you're suggesting that people together can do something powerful and effective in making changes in a good way.
It gives us a perspective of saying, even in the face of an incredible odds of billions of dollars being pumped in with PR and the fossil fuel industry, of all the things that seem impossible to tackle, I think as people of faith, we're constantly saying that looking at death, we would, as people, say that can't be conquered. And yet our faith says no. For every experience of death, God's answer always is, I can make something out of that. Keep at it. It's awfully easy when you look at the power and influence of the fossil fuel industry since the Industrial Revolution. It's awful easy to get totally depressed, disillusioned, and want to simply give up. And I think that's where our faith is so important, to say that God's answer is always yes to all the no's of life, and just to hang on to that.
I can see a whole network of vibrant and powerful congregations that are just bursting with people who have discovered their own leadership and their own ability to act in a powerful way together. And I can see this whole network popping up around the Portland area. There's a growing network in Salem, and people are getting interest around the country about how we are working with and raising up leadership among congregations and within people of faith. And so then when you have a whole network of congregations that are ready to take bold and powerful action together, well, then it's just a matter of figuring out what we do.
I want to thank each and every one of you for being with us on Brethren Voices today and sharing your faith and your call to action. We have a special gift we're going to conclude with, but I'd like to conclude by saying, this is Brent Carlson wishing you peace.
We are
the rising sun. We are the change.